I've been using an Android ever since the first one dropped, the T-Mobile G1 back in 2008. From that moment on, I've been ride or die for Android. I've made hundreds of videos about it, built my YouTube brand around it, and stuck with it all these years. It's only up until recently that I started to dip my toes into the iPhone world just to see what all the buzz is about and to see how it stacks up against the Android ecosystem that I've been stuck to for so long. This year, I went all in on the iPhone 16 Pro Max in this new desert titanium color, and it's been a few weeks since I've been using it. And so far, I'll be real with you, it pretty much feels just like last year's model. Sure, there's a slightly bigger display on the Max model and a new camera button on the side, but other than that, not much else has changed besides a few minor improvements. To be fair though, I honestly didn't have a bad experience with last year's iPhone. It was still fast, smooth, and comfortable to use, especially with that new titanium build. And I'm sure most folks can probably say the same thing, so I can see why Apple once again didn't want to change much this year. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. But I feel like this year, they really didn't push the envelope that much. The only new feature that was supposed to be their quote-unquote wow factor is kind of a gimmick. I think most of you probably know what I'm talking about already. It's the new camera control. It's a button that sits right below the power key, and it's supposed to help improve the camera experience. But it really didn't, at least for me. For starters, when you press it, it instantly launches the camera, something that the action button could already be configured to do with a long press. Then within the viewfinder, if you press it again, it will snap a photo. Or if you long press it, it'll start recording. From there, you can even lightly press on the key and then begin to swipe left or right to zoom in or out. That one was pretty cool. And then with a little light double tap, you can also switch camera modes and adjust other things like depth, exposure, style, tone, and more. And after a couple of weeks of playing around with it, I ended up just avoiding it because it was actually more of a hassle to use. For example, when I was using it to zoom in or out, it was just easier and quicker to tap on the zoom toggles within the viewfinder. And yeah, you can also just link the zoom presets to the camera control, but it's still easier to just tap on those buttons within the software. It also feels a bit awkward to use when you hold the phone vertically, and sometimes when my hands are wet or even just sweaty, the sliding is pretty unresponsive. The only time that I think it can come in handy is if you're a photographer who wants to adjust other camera settings that would normally require you to dig through menus. But let's be real for a second. How often are the majority of iPhone users going to need quick access to depth or tone controls? Most people just want to take out their phone, snap a quick photo, and call it a day. And for that, this button right here just feels a bit unnecessary. It's definitely a cool party trick, but it's not something that I use frequently enough to say that I can't live without it. Plus, Apple could have even done way more with this button by allowing it to control other things, not just the camera. Imagine if this could just adjust your phone's brightness or volume when you're watching videos, or even act as a shortcut for other apps you use frequently. That would have added real value. Unfortunately, as it stands, now it's locked into just being a camera control. Now, even though the iPhone 16 Pro comes with that tough titanium frame and super strong ceramic shield glass, I still don't trust it completely naked. That's where TORRAS, the sponsor of this video, comes in. I've been using their cases and screen protectors for years, and they've never let me down. TORRAS makes some of the most cleanest and durable cases you'll find, and they've upped the game with their original O-shaped stand design. Their new case is the Ostand 360-degree spin case, which I've been rocking on my iPhone 16 Pro Max for the past few weeks. And let me tell you, this case is fantastic. The new design has these sleek lines carved into the back, symbolizing the hands of a clock. And that rotating stand clicks into place in 4 different directions. You can prop up your phone in any way you want. It's super smooth and crazy satisfying as well. And of course, it's MagSafe compatible and super durable. It's basically everything you need in one case, so you can ditch all that extra gear. Plus, it comes with this new Dune Desert Gold color, which I'm obsessed with. If it's not your thing though, they've also got Onyx Black and Ivory White, both looking as sleek as ever. For even more protection, I also slapped on TORRAS' new GlassGo X screen protector. Installation was a breeze with their 2-step snap and pull setup. Plus, this thing is seriously tough. Scratch resistant even against keys or sharp objects in my pocket. So if you're grabbing an iPhone 16, you've got to check out their new TORRAS Ostand case and GlassGo X screen protector for that full 360-degree protection. I'll drop that link at the top of the description to check it out. Trust me, your phone will thank you. Now let's talk about the software. And of course, we gotta talk about Apple's shiny new AI suite, Apple Intelligence. Yeah, it's not even here yet, at least out of the box. You can upgrade to iOS 18.1 beta and get a glimpse of it, but most of its features and capabilities are not even out yet. What you can try is the usual stuff like improved writing suggestions, summarizations, and a more natural Siri. And to be honest, some of those features are actually useful. For example, iOS now uses AI to summarize bundle notifications. For example, when the group chat is blowing up, you can quickly catch up without needing to read a ton of messages. When you're responding to messages, AI suggests contextual responses. And when talking to the new Siri, it can handle mistakes that you may have made. Set a timer for 8 minutes. And it even lets you interrupt it without needing to repeat your command or question. Tell me the weather in Texas.
It's currently clear and 88 degrees.
Okay, now tell me what the weather is in Vegas.
It's currently clear and 90 degrees in Las Vegas, Nevada.
I even compared it against Google Gemini. I'll leave that link in the cards. But there's still a good amount of AI stuff that Apple showed off and it's still not here yet, like Genmoji, which lets you generate custom emojis. Image One, which auto-generates images based on your notes or sketches. And an even more powerful Siri that integrates with your apps and digs deep within your data to do things like pull up lunch plans from text messages that you may have sent days ago, transfer files from one app to another, and even some crazier stuff like if you're filling out a form and need to write in your driver's license, it can find a picture of it, extract the info, and plug it right in without needing to leave the page. Those are features that are still working in the pipeline, and if they do work just as well as Apple describes them, then Apple Intelligence will definitely be something that I will try out in the future. Now, aside from AI, iOS hasn't changed much. I mean, they've added a bit more customization, but as someone who's big on Android's endless customization options, I was still left wanting more. Like, sure, you can now modify the tint of your widgets and icons, but they only work with a dark mode look, and they honestly look really bad. Not even exaggerating. You can also freely place icons on the home screen now, which is something that Android has been doing since the beginning of time. And being a hardcore Android user who is big on customization, I just had to figure out a way to spice up the home screen with a unique look. And surprisingly, it's possible. Just like how we have KWGT custom widgets on Android, iOS has Widgie, which is very similar. I started looking for some packs and I grabbed these custom widgets from a pack called VisionOS. And I did have to pay for it, which also wasn't cheap, but I do really like the aesthetics. Plus, they're even interactive. As for the icons, there's also a loophole in customizing them with the Shortcuts app. It's really just having the image file of the icon pack and setting it as a shortcut on the home screen. It works like a charm, plus the icon pack also came from the VisionOS pack that I downloaded. And I also really enjoy these alternative icons as well called the icons. I'll leave those links down below. So I'm really glad how my iOS home screen turned out. Still, even with these hacks, it doesn't even come close to what's capable on Android. Samsung's One UI alone blows it out of the water in terms of customization. That said, I do appreciate some iOS features that stock Android doesn't even have. For example, I'm still a fan of the dynamic island. It has some small features that make it really useful. For example, when I'm waiting for an Uber, it shows me how far away my driver is without having to switch apps. Or if I'm playing music, I can control it with a simple long press. Or when I set a timer, it shows me just how much time I have left. Just small things like that made me really enjoy the dynamic island. I also have to give props to iOS 18's Control Center. It's way better than Android's quick settings, at least by default. You can resize controls, easily recognize icons, and swipe through panels for more options like smart home controls. Android's quick settings, even on premium devices like Samsung, still aren't this good. I also really enjoy that you can customize your phone call background so that when you're calling someone, they can actually get to see what you look like on their screen. It's a fun little touch that lets you personalize your calls, which I'm all about. And get this, if you're in the States, you can finally record phone calls on iPhones. This feature wasn't really available on most phones in the US before, so it's a pretty big deal here. Google's also getting in on it too with their new call notes feature on the Pixel 9s, so both ecosystems are starting to offer some new call recording love. Plus, being able to stack widgets on iOS is super useful. The only other phones that are also doing this are some of the latest Samsung phones, which is great, but it's still not as widespread on the Android side. And of course, just like any other software, there were some annoying things that I didn't like about iOS. First off, I don't get why Apple makes you dive into the system settings just to tweak some of the app-specific options. I also still don't like that I'm not able to see any of my notification icons within the status bar, and transferring files between my iPhone and non-Apple devices is still a big pain. AirDrop is great and all, but it's locked into the Apple ecosystem. Instead, I had to use a third-party tool like AirDrop.net just to be able to send a file to my computer. It's way more complicated than it needs to be. Also, iOS still doesn't have split screen support, which feels like a huge miss. You can't change most of your default apps to third-party alternatives like the Home app, which is super limiting, and picture-in-picture mode, it's only available for video apps, not for other things like navigation, which would be really handy. Even with all the downsides though, the main reason people stick with the iPhones, especially in the States, is of course iMessage. And yeah, Apple finally gave in and now supports RCS messaging, so you can send full-res images and videos, see typing indicators, read receipts, and get better group chat management with your Android friends. But if I'm being real, it's still not quite what I expected. First off, I couldn't even activate it yet. Some carriers, like mine, Mint Mobile, aren't supported yet, and it could take some time as well to be supported, which is super annoying. Then there's the whole green versus blue bubble thing. Even with RCS enabled, Android users are still stuck with that ugly green color. Plus, it's not even end-to-end encrypted yet by default, which feels like a big miss. And iMessage still has all those extra exclusive features that keep Android users looking like we're playing catch-up. Stuff like screen effects, some iMessage apps, and more. It's kind of like what Apple did with FaceTime. Sure, we Android users can join in on FaceTime calls now through a link, but we're still left with a terrible experience. The video quality is a lot lower, we're missing out on some cool unique features like SharePlay, and Android users can't even start a FaceTime by themselves. They have to get invited by someone on an iPhone. It's like Apple's that slick car salesman who promises you something but ends up delivering less when it's not in their best interest. Now, when shooting photos or videos with the iPhone 16, it's honestly been a really great experience. Apple knows how to deliver a great camera experience. Super easy to use, fast, and versatile. Plus, no matter the lighting situation, it usually provided great results. Still, I decided to put the iPhone 16 Pro Max head-to-head with the Pixel 9 Pro XL and Galaxy S24 Ultra to see how it would compare against some of the most popular and top-of-the-line Androids here in the US, and here's how it did. Of course, all three phones provided excellent coloring, shadowing, and detail. However, the iPhone did tend to overexpose the most in certain scenarios, especially when zooming in. The Galaxy clearly stood out as the best for zoomed-in shots, and it can zoom much farther than both the iPhone and Pixel. I'd also say that the Pixel excelled in portrait and macro shots. As for nighttime photography, I was surprised to find that the Galaxy did the best job here in capturing the darkness outside with perfect night sky coloring, shadowing, and overall coloration. The iPhone, on the other hand, tended to brighten up the scene, often at the cost of blowing out the highlights and shadows. So that's where the iPhone cameras stand when compared to some of the other flagships in the market. It's obviously a fantastic camera and will work for most people, but it's not a runaway winner. Now, the thing that impressed me the most though was the performance and battery life. Let's start with the battery. This thing lasts forever. Even with heavy usage like gaming, social media, watching videos, editing TikToks, and the always on display enabled, it still managed to give me around 7 to 9 hours of screen active time. That's pretty wild, especially considering how big this phone is. The only thing is that I wish it charged faster. Even though Apple increased the charging speed a bit, it still maxes out at around 30 watts, which is still pretty slow when compared to other Androids that usually charge at a minimum of 40 watts and above. And of course, the performance was another aspect that really blew me away. I mean, it's one thing to just throw a fancy chip inside the phone, and call it a day, but it's another to actually optimize the OS around that chip to really fully take advantage of it, and as a result, have everything constantly be buttery smooth. No lag, no stutter, just smooth sailing. In the end, my experience with the iPhone 16 Pro Max wasn't terrible, but I can't say anything really blew me away. Sure, there are some cool software features I wish Android had, like notification summarization, the dynamic island, and a better control center, but honestly, just like last year and the year before that, it wasn't enough for me to make a complete switch. It feels like the same old iPhone story with a few minor tweaks just to keep their loyal fans coming back to drop a ton of money just to flex that they have the latest iPhone. I mean, if you got an older iPhone 15, 14, or even the 13, except for the dynamic island, you're basically getting the same experience. It's like Apple's rent is due, and they're just cranking out slightly revamped versions of the same phone just to keep that recognizable iPhone look. So I'll be switching back to the Android side just because I prefer the endless amount of customization options that they still have. iOS 18 is just too restricting for me, even with those cool custom widgets and icon tricks that I did. If next year Apple drops something bolder and more groundbreaking, I may give them a shot again. But for now, it's back to Android for me. Anyway, check out this video right here for a comparison between Android 15 and iOS 18. If you like this review, drop a thumbs up if you enjoyed it. Thanks for hanging around till the end, and I'll catch you guys in the next one. Kapow!